Here's a hint that I don't do technology. Most guys come up with an iPad now. Everything's on an iPad. They just scroll through page after page. I've got that stuff. Good morning. Welcome. Good to be here. My name is Owen Gustafson. I like how Jason introduces himself. I'm one of the pastors here. And I have to say, I'm not one of the pastors here. I'm just a guy that helps out. And it's great to be here this morning. Good to be with you. And a little while later, I'll share a little bit more about why. Several years ago, I had to get prescription sunglasses. I didn't really know I needed them until I had to drive to a location far away where I didn't know the road signs. See, I wore sunglasses that had the cheaters in so I could see stuff down here, and I thought I was seeing everything okay. But I was just driving around here where I knew what the signs said ahead of time, so I didn't really have to read them. I knew what they said. But now all of a sudden I'm driving through South Dakota and Nebraska, and I'm realizing that without the correction, I wasn't reading those signs till I was too close to them for it to make any difference. I had to rely on the lady on that phone that talks to you all the time and tells you, turn here and turn there and do whatever you had to do. And I was reminded of that. I had to drive out to Colorado again 2 weeks ago, and my prescription sunglasses, the one lens kept falling out. So I brought them down to the glasses place, and I said, you need to fix this because I need to make this trip. And they looked at me and said, we can't fix that. We've got to send those in. So once again, I'm back to the ones with the cheaters, and now I realize your eyesight doesn't get any better through time. I could see the cars, but yeah, the signs were getting worse and worse. And this morning, we're going to look at that 2 Kings chapter 6, 8 through 23. Passage in there, and what it is to see clearly. What it is to see with eyes of faith. What it is to see what is real. What is important in life and what God wants us to see. Let's pray as we begin this morning. Father, thank you so much. I thank you that I'm here. I thank you that all these people are here. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for that song, Oh Lord my God, how great thou art. We worship you because you are a great God. We celebrate this morning because we're here and we're able to open your word and look at your goodness and your greatness and see how it impacts our lives. Ask your blessing. I pray that you open our eyes to see what you have to say to each one of us. Thank you for our time. In Jesus' name, amen. As you're turning 2 Kings 6, 8 through 23, remember we're at the time in history where the prophet Elijah has been taken to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha is now the prophet in Israel. And I'm going to get those names mixed up. I don't know why they did that. Elisha, Elijah. Why not throw in a Owen or Aaron or something? But we've got Elisha and Elijah. So Elijah's gone. Goes to heaven in a whirlwind. Remember when he left, he knew Elisha was going to be the prophet, and he asked him, what shall I give you? And Elisha says, let there be a double portion of your spirit, of the spirit that God has put in you. Let me have a double portion of that so that I can do the job of being a prophet. And it happened. In all of the Bible, the only person to perform more miracles than Elisha was Jesus himself. The king of Israel is Jehoram, a name we are most likely not familiar with. Anybody remember Jehoram? I didn't. It's just he was the king. We do remember his parents, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Ahab has died in battle. Jezebel is still around. And in chapter 9, she meets a very undignified end. Scripture does tell us that the son of Ahab and Jezebel, Jehoram, did evil in the sight of the Lord. Let's read that passage together. 2 Kings chapter 6, 8 through 23. Why am I in Daniel? Starting in verse 8. Once when the king of Syria was warring against Israel, he took counsel with his servants, saying, at such and such a place shall be my camp. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel. And he said, beware, do not go past this place, for the Syrians are going down there. And the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God told him. Thus he used to warn him so that he saved himself more than once or twice. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this, and he called his servants and said to them, will you not show me which one of us is for the king of Israel? And one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak even in your bedroom. And he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and seize him. It was told him, behold, he is in Dothan. So he sent their horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God arose early in the morning and went out, and behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, alas, my master, what shall we do? And Elisha said, do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened his eyes, the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And when the Syrians came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, please, strike this people with blindness. So he struck them in blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, this is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me. I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And he led them to Samaria. As they entered Samaria, Elisha prayed again, O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. As soon as the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, my father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down? Elisha answered, you shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those whom you have taken captive with the sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and they may drink and go to their master. So he prepared for them a great feast. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. And the Syrians did not come down on raids into the land of Israel again. Things have changed since chapter 5. Last week, Pastor Jason shared from chapter 5 the story of Haman, who was a commander in the Syrian army, a very high-level person in the army of Syria. And he came to Israel to seek out Elisha the prophet to get cured from leprosy. He got cured, and he proclaims, now I know that there is no God on all the earth but in Israel. Enough time has passed, and we don't know how much time, but enough time has passed. So that is no longer the case for the Syrians. So now they're back to warring against Israel. In verse 8, when we start out the reading, we see their strategy. It's a guerrilla warfare thing. We're going to send in this group, and we're going to camp there, and we're going to surprise the Israelites, and we're going to take them by going here or there and just setting up these ambushes. Either a pass or a high place where they would have complete surprise and be able to have victory over their enemy. And then we see what happens. Elisha is able to know what the Syrian king is planning, and he tells Jehoram the king, he says, don't go there. The Syrians are planning an ambush, so just stay away. And we see Jehoram sends his people out. I think he's just checking on Elisha. He sends his people out and they say, yeah, they're there. They're there, so don't go there. The trap fails. The Syrian king finally comes to the conclusion in verse 11. We have a spy. We have a mole in our midst. There has to be a spy in order for the enemy to know what we are about to do. In verse 12, one of his servants, I was always curious, how'd this guy know? But he knew. Maybe he was from Naaman, from that era, but he knew. And he says, no, there's no spy, O king. But there is Elisha, the prophet of Israel. And he tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. In other words, there is nothing that you have that's a secret to the prophet of Israel. He knows the thoughts in your mind. He knows the words that come out of your mouth before they come out. You would think this would be a good time or a spot to say, if you were that king, that say, if there is a God in Israel who has that power to allow his prophet to know everything I say, maybe that's a God I should check out. Maybe that's a God I should worship. Maybe I would want to be on that God's side. Instead, he said, let's go find out where he is so we can go and seize him and eliminate this problem. So he sends, once he finds out Elisha's in Dothan, he sends his horses, his chariots, and a great army. I think those words are used specifically because normally these were just little raiding parties that would go in and raid in Israel. Now he sends, we're going to get this done. We're going to send a great army, enough to totally surround that city. Dothan is a small town. It's about 12 miles from the city of Samaria, 10 to 12 miles. So they come by night and they surround the city. And early the next morning, the servant gets up to make coffee, get the paper, check the garden, and draw water for the day. That's the 4 things you had to do if you were the servant. He goes outside, and what does he see but the horses and chariots of a great army? The first thing you would do when you're looking out, you would see them over there. You would instantly turn and see if there was an escape route over there. And no, he sees the great army has encircled his town. He sees horses and chariots and the great army circling the entire city. Some years ago, when my granddaughter, my middle child, was learning to talk, she was spending a lot of time with Grandma. And Grandma was teaching her words and phrases. And one of the things she picked up on was when there was some conflict, Grandma would say to her, no good, Kira, no good, no good. And Kira picked up on that. So whenever there was conflict, usually it was her older sister got in trouble, she'd come back to Grandma, not good, Grandma, not good. It was the cutest thing. This would have been the time when the servant would have come back to Elisha and said, Elisha, not good, not good. We're surrounded. And Elisha answers with that classic line we see so many times in Scripture, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. God's got this. For those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prays this prayer, O Lord, open his eyes that he might see. And it says, the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. What are the things that get in our way that prevent us from seeing clearly, with eyes wide open, the correct view, the view that God intended us to see? J.D. Greer said this. He said, our spiritual sight is 10,000 times more important than our physical sight. We're saying if we only see with our eyes, if we don't see what's behind the scene, the spiritual quality of life, we are missing out totally on what's important. A.W. Tozer said, when it comes into our minds, when we think about God, is the most important thing about us, our spiritual thoughts about God. And what is it? What is it that prevents us from having an accurate spiritual view of life and about God? First of all, I think the things that Coming to mind are the troubles of life. A doctor report that brings news no one wants to hear. A relationship that seemingly cannot be healed and it causes constant anguish in life. A financial setback, a retirement account that isn't quite big enough to make ends meet. A son or a daughter, a family member who walked away from God and family, and it grieves your heart every single day. Sometimes our troubles look as big as the horses and the chariots and the great army that surrounded Gothen. I was thinking about that this week. Well, it didn't really until this morning, really. But it was 2 weeks ago I went to, I knew I was going to be talking about the troubles of life. Don't ever do that. It was 2 weeks ago I went to Colorado. I was supposed to watch the dogs and the two cats, the two evil cats, for about 3-4 days, and then I was going to come home. And then I was going to have substitute people who were going to come in and take my place so I could go home. Well, after I got out there, the people that were going to take my place, they were, oh no, we can't do that now because our dog is having problems. So, okay. I had two choices. You either bring the dogs home with you or you stay in Colorado another week. And I said, okay, I'll stay. I'm not bringing those dogs home, so I'll stay another week. So now I'm stuck in a house in a cul-de-sac of people that I really don't think they like each other because nobody talks to each other. You're there. Even though you're right next to people, it's like being in a isolation. It's weird. But that's the cul-de-sac of reality, where we are today. So I'm there the extra week, and late in the week I realized this tooth down here that was giving me a problem wasn't going to make it. So when your lower jaw starts to throb and you've had an abscessed tooth before, you know where you're going. So now I'm in the drugstore in Woodland Park, Colorado on Friday afternoon talking to my dentist. How do I get some relief for this thing? Because I'm not getting home. So he's getting me the penicillin and then the lady's giving it to me and she said, have you ever had penicillin before? And I said, yeah, and I've had an abscessed tooth before too. So she says, that can't be fun. Here, go. Well, then on the way home from there, I realized my ear was popping. And I thought, well, that's fine. We're in Colorado. We're up and down. We're going over a 9,000 foot pass down to 6,000 feet, and it's just popping. And about an hour later, when you're trying to do this to get it to unpop, I realized that my eardrum was inflamed and very, very sore. So now I had an infection in my eardrum as well as my jaw. I thought, well, I'm doing penicillin. I'm fine. And I got everything going, and last night I got home after driving 840 miles. Got home and I started unloading stuff into the house, and I thought, it's kind of chilly in here in the house. In fact, it's real chilly. And I thought, well, I did turn the thermostat down, so I go in the other room and crank it up a little bit and keep unloading stuff, and then I realize I didn't hear the furnace kick on. Then I talked to this middle child of mine who was home there a week ago when I was gone. He says, yeah, I thought it was a little chilly. But he hadn't looked at the thermostat, so the furnace has been off for over a week. It's chilly in the house at dark on a Saturday night. I just found every blanket I could, and it wasn't until this morning I thought, no, wait a minute. I'm talking about the troubles of life. I thought, I don't need any more. On my way in this morning, I realized I gassed up last time somewhere out by Chamberlain, South Dakota, and the car's on fumes. I'm not even going to make it into church this morning. It's like I didn't need any more troubles. I know they're just minuscule compared to some of the things you are going through, but that was my life in the last week. John 16:33, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have troubles. You will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. The disciples really didn't know what Jesus was saying when he said it. But after Easter, after the resurrection, after they saw with their own eyes the resurrected Jesus, then they knew for certain that he had overcome the world. J.I. Packer says this, and still he seeks the fellowship of his people, and he sends them both joys and sorrows in order to detach their love from other things and attach it to himself. In his book, If the Tomb is Empty, Pastor Joby Martin says this: how many of you know that God's mercy and his grace, that he would love us enough to take the circumstances of our lives and use them to chisel away anything in our lives that doesn't look like Jesus? Sometimes we find ourselves in places of immense pain, whether by our own doing or something somebody else did to us. Ultimately, God's in charge of it all. Nothing has happened to us that hasn't been sifted through his sovereign hand. And yet when it does, we say, how could you, God? And he says, because I love you, because you're my son, because you're my daughter. End of quote from Joby. We can't put our faith in our circumstances, whether they're good or bad. Lean into Jesus, not the experiences of life. It's the relationship with him that defines life. Draw near to him, and he will draw near to you. The other thing, other than the troubles of life that distract us from a relationship with Jesus, is the idols that keep us from God. You're saying, what? We don't have idols? That was the Israelites. They were the ones that had the little statues of Baal up on their counter. They started worshiping other gods. They're the ones that had the idols. We don't have idols. We aren't like them. Today we don't really have carved images. We're much more progressive than that. They aren't carved images, but we do have our idols. We do. We worship consumerism, our careers. We worship greed over generosity. We worship what our house looks like, infinitely more than the ministry we could be doing in it. We worship the idol of likes and followers and the approval of our peers, which is the idol of perception. And possibly the biggest idol of all is the idol of comfort. If nothing else, we want to be comfortable. Our lives are centered around obtaining it. So while we would never bow to a carved image, we still bow to our idols. In my drive out there, you drive through the sand hills of Nebraska. And the sand hills of Nebraska are exactly what they say it is. It's sand hills. Just little hills. And then they get a little bigger. But it just goes on. And there's sand, so nothing grows on them except some really scruffy grass. I mean, the grass that ain't going to keep a very big cow going very long. It's scruffy. And it just goes and goes and goes. And I'm driving through this, and all of a sudden I see a sign. The sign says, Scenic Overlook Ahead. That's got my curiosity. I'm thinking somebody in Nebraska has got a sense of humor to say there is a scenic overlook in the sand hills of Nebraska. I am going to check this out. So I got there, and there it is. Well, it was a little drive-through. You could go through, and I call it a ditch. They called it a river. Down there's some scruffy little pine trees because something could finally grow. There was some water. But it didn't rise to the level of a scenic overlook. I'm sorry. I think somebody just decided, let's put that sign up there and see if anybody drives in and looks. Let's see how many we can fool today. That was my observation of the sand hills of the scenic overlook in the sand hills of Nebraska. Every day in our lives, we see those signs that say, Scenic Overlook Ahead. There's $1 billion spent every day in this country to get your attention and to get mine, to buy something, to get something, to go somewhere, to be someone, to have a relationship that we don't know have, that will bring peace into your life. That will bring comfort. It'll bring satisfaction. It will fulfill every desire you have. Those $1 billion signs that we see as advertisements that impact us every day are just like that sign that says scenic overlook ahead. They cannot and they do not deliver what they promised. John Calvin said this many years ago. He said, our hearts are idol-making factories. We are a sucker for the here and now. An idol is anything that competes with the one true God. We can be and are like the person who goes grocery shopping when we are really, really, really hungry. You ever done that? You're really hungry. Everything looks good and the cart is pretty soon full of stuff you really didn't intend to buy, but it goes in there. Set your table with the Lord. Feast on Him, His grace, His mercy, His love, and the things of this world will not be nearly as satisfying. C.S. Lewis said this. He said, when you begin to see what you really want is really found in Him. Let me say that again. Life begins when you begin to see what you really want out of life is really found in Him, and the inference is, and it's found no place else because of who we were created to be. In my generation, I'm retired now, and you see a lot of people are retired. I realize that a lot of people get to the end of life, they put their entire focus into who they are and their work and what they do and the things that they do associated with work. And then one day they retire. And all of a sudden there's this overwhelming realization that what I spent my entire life focusing on didn't give me the fulfillment I thought it would, because now when that's over, I don't have what I thought it would give me. But you and I live in a world, and you could be trapped in that, to think that your identity is in what you are doing, rather than your identity being in the God who loves you and gave Himself for you and wants that relationship that defines life. So early in life, those of you that are young enough or younger, you don't get a redo. I don't get a redo. I don't go back and do my work life over again. I think I've told you this before, but when I was a young man, newly married, I was going to be the world's best farmer, you know. I was going to be, in fact, I don't have this in there, but on our first wedding anniversary, this was going to be anniversary number 1. Way back in the day, we used to have the county extension deal, the plot days. You remember those? Where you go and the county agent, and that was the night of our first anniversary. And I hadn't even considered that it was our anniversary. I said, well, I got to go to this county plot meeting tonight. And my dear wife said, it's our anniversary. Didn't even occur to me. You know what I said? I can remember it because I've heard it repeated back to me many times over the next 40 years. I said, but I need to go to this county plot meeting because it only happens once a year. Trust me, I heard that. Early in life, recognize, figure out that what you really want is really only found in Jesus. Because you were created in the image of God. And the gigantic hole that's inside of you, that spot that only Jesus can fill, we try and fill with so many other things. But it's only Jesus. Figure that out and pursue Him with all of your strength. Pastor Adam Flint says this, when you know idols are false hope, or you know idols are false hope, when things fall apart, because when they do, you never cry out to money, your house, your job, or any other idol. You cry out to God. Joe A. Martin closes the chapter in his book with this prayer. I pray that God will bless you or break you, Whatever it takes for God to draw you closer to Him. Whatever it takes for us to release our grip on the stuff that keeps us from Christ. May we be a people of God who don't allow the circumstances of life, whether good or bad, or the stuff of life, to compete with our affection for God. May we be like the psalmist who cried out, "My heart is fixed on you, O God, my heart is fixed." To know that is where life has meaning, that is the essence of life, to know Him and to make Him known. Know that we are created for such a time as this. Let me just throw this in. It's not in here either. It should be, but it's not. One of the weird things, I knew I was going to preach. I knew I had this passage this morning, but now I'm stuck in Colorado. I don't have any resource materials. I had my Bible, and that was it. So you watch YouTube. You can see lots of people preach on this passage. And I was watching these guys, and some of them are really good. And this one guy got a really, really good talk on this, even better than what I did today. This was okay, but he did a lot better. And he got to the end, you know what he said? He said, "We are not made for this world." And I wanted to scream if I could have. We are made for this world. We are. If you buy that idea that we're not made in this world for this world, you will check out. You will just be one of those tired Christians that, I'll just muddle along here. It'll be so good to get to glory. Instead of embracing the life that God has given us with great joy, because He knows that we were put here at such a time as this, for this time and this place, to know Him and to make Him known. And by doing thus, we experience what Jesus talked about when He said, "I have come that you might have abundant life here and now." That goes into glory. It doesn't wait till glory, it starts here and now because of Jesus and what He's doing inside of us. How He's releasing the idols and the circumstances of life so that we can be full of His presence and His glory, and it just shines through us each and every day. We are created for such a time as this, but it's the time that we see through the eyes of faith that the Jesus we serve is a Jesus that has overcome this world. And He doesn't want us to be drugged down by the stuff of this world. He wants us to experience that reality that we too can overcome the circumstances and the stuff of this world and be full with Him. We have the privilege of being salt and light in our world, and in doing so, we will experience a satisfaction and a joy and a peace that is found nowhere else. We continue in our text, back to 2 Kings. We see in verse 18, the Syrians came down, they're going to close the trap, they're going to get this guy. Elisha's going to be ours. So Elisha prays. It's interesting. Elisha knew that, hey, there's a chariot of horses of fire around me. God's got this. But he doesn't sit and watch. No, he prays. God asks us to pray, to be in that constant communication with Him. And Elisha says, please strike this people with blindness. And the blindness was more of an awareness that you aren't going to lead this army down 10 miles down the road if they're physically blind. It was more of a spiritual or an awareness blindness. They really didn't know what was going on. They just go, okay, we'll go. So he leads them down to Samaria, which is the capital. Or first he says, this is not the way. Follow me. I will bring you to the man you seek. He led them to Samaria, which is the capital of Israel, a place where the king is, a place where there was obviously a big part of his army. And then when they get there, Elisha prays again, now open their eyes. So now they open their eyes, and boy, what a surprise when you all of a sudden see, hey, we came down here to set a trap to encircle the city and get Elisha. And now we're standing here, we're looking at Elisha. Now they realize that's Elisha. And we're in the trap. We're surrounded by the army of the Israelites. What a change of position. Jehoram the king says to Elisha, can I kill them? Can I kill them? They're here. Let me destroy them. Elisha says, no. No, you wouldn't do that with any of your prisoners. So set bread and water before them that they may eat and drink and go back to their master. So he prepared for them a great feast. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away. And the Syrians did not come again into the land of Israel. See, Elisha knew he wanted to send a message back to the Syrian king. So you send back these people who you had now prepared a great feast for. You had shared a meal, and in the culture of all of those countries, the Syrians, the Israelites, everybody there, if you broke bread with somebody, if you had your feet under their table and you shared a meal, that was a covenant of peace. If you did that, if you shared that meal, if you broke bread, you now had the other person's back. That was a covenant that would not be broken. That's what Elisha was doing. Let's send these guys home with this covenant of peace. I think a big part of where it says they didn't come back again into the land of Israel, these guys weren't going to come back. It's no, we've broke bread with these people. We have a covenant of peace with them. We can't go back. And so that lasts for, once again, we don't know how, I think in the next verse after our section, we go back to war again. So it didn't last forever. But he sent them away. Must have been quite a story when they got home. I'm sure the king of Syria was standing there watching for his army to come, and he was looking, where's Elisha? They must have him in there somewhere. I sent this great army. They should have been able to get him. They don't have they just had the story. They said, oh man, he cast a spell on us. We got in this state of confusion. And the king wanted to kill us, but this Elisha whom you sent us to capture, he took our side. He said, give them bread and water so they can eat and drink before they got home. And he had a great feast prepared for us, and now we are here. Sound familiar to anyone? Maybe the Apostle Paul in Romans 12:20. If your enemy is thirsty, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. Do not become overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. And the result was the Syrians did not come again into the land of Israel. That's the end of our section, end of our chapter. The takeaway for us, I think this morning, may we be the people that recognizes that what we are looking for in life can only be found in the person and the presence of Jesus in our life. Stuff is good. I like shiny stuff. Anybody that hangs around and sees what's in the boat knows that I like stuff. But when stuff becomes an end in itself, when it takes our focus off the person and the presence of Jesus in our life, then it's an idol that we need to get rid of if we want to experience life to the fullest. We can't let the idols and we can't let the circumstances of life get in the way of a worship of a God who loves us more than we can know or think.